Hello, I'm Savannah.
I'm Caitlin.
I'm Katie.
I'm Micah.
I'm Jess.
And we're going to talk about the LGBT misrepresentation in the media. So first, we're going to
start off, can you guys name any LGBT characters you know from books, movies, plays? You can't do it.
just throw spitball at me.
Oh, I was gonna say I read a book and it was called Unrequited Love, and like half the characters in it were not
Unrequited.
Yes.
I don't know how to speak English.
You got Barney Stinson and How I Met Your Mother. That's it.
But so his character was gay.
It's okay. It's okay.
The actor.
Which ones?
Wait,
Oh,
The actual people or the character?
The character.
Yeah.
never mind.
wait, that's not lie.
Sorry, my fault. Neil Patrick Harris is gay.
Orange is the new black.
From,
Yes.
There you go.
Great Gatsby.
All right.
Yeah, that
A
one.
lot of people in Glee.
Dumbledore.
That's bad.
Dumbledore's gay. It's bad, but it's there.
From Modern Family.
Yeah.
Wasn't Beauty and the Beast?
Gaston.
Yeah, that's right.
No, not
Yes.
No,
The other one. Well, there could be an argument, but
Shameless.
in Downton Abbey, there's a
The butler.
Good show.
Yeah, the under butler.
Is it downtown? That's what I'm going to
No, it's downtown.
Oh, okay. Well, it's okay. D-A. That's a B. Right.
Unbreakable Kimmy
I
Schmidt.
can only think of.
Oh
yeah,
so
I'm
good.
The Office.
The Office.
Look at my, I don't even know why I'm writing up here, considering it looks like this. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a significant, this list is terrible, it's behind me, so it's okay. But there's a significant list. How do you guys feel these characters are represented? Do you feel like they're represented well? Yes.
I feel like in a couple of shows, like Modern Family, it does a very good job of like depicting their struggles compared to like the rest of the family. So like it's kind of specific to like their own situation. And then like, who's the other one I was thinking? Right there. Oh, Orange is the New Black. Like it's very different because it's kind of an all-female cast as well, but it still kind of depicts it in a way where, like it's almost, I don't want to say a lifestyle because it's all in prison, but like it kind of shows like truly who they are. So.
Okay, cool. So we kind of have an idea of what's represented, what we see all the time. It's everywhere in the media. So we're going to kind of get into the problem, and our main problem is the misrepresentation. We can obviously see that there is representation in the media. It's everywhere, especially with changing times and everything like that. So it is everywhere, but no matter what, there's always going to be misrepresentation by stereotypes, things we're not seeing. So before we start, we are going to all talk about our individual majors in regards to what we see in the media. Since it is the media, we will have a number of clips to see so you can kind of get an idea of what you're seeing and if you didn't notice it before. But before we get started, we're just going to ask the basic question: what is representation? Merriam-Webster defines representation as the description or portrayal of someone or something in a particular way or of being of a certain nature. And Merriam-Webster describes misrepresentation as giving false or misleading representation, usually with an intent to deceive or to be unfair. Obviously, it's not always the case. You're not always writing characters to be stereotyped, but it can happen accidentally. So the bigger thing, my first thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit deeper into the problem. So Catherine Sender she wrote an article, No Hard Feelings, Reflexity, and Queer Effect in the New Media Landscape. So what this is a bit of an adaptation of it. So you kind of see the three levels of the media. So in the middle, that's the center level, this is the professional media, the well-funded, the institutionalized. This is your Hollywood. So Hollywood, news, sports, this is where all the money goes, so it's pretty much what we see every day. So if something in this level misrepresents something, it's what we're most likely going to see. The next level is the marginal level, so it's a little bit less professional, a little bit less funded, a little bit more flexible. They can kind of do with that what they will. So you're going to see it still. It's still on TV, it's still on radio, but you're not going to see it as much. So if there are more gay actors or more gay characters, you're not going to get as best of a picture. And the final level is the peripheral level, it's the outside. This is the unfunded, amateur, you're more like online kind of things, bloggers, people on YouTube, the smaller, lower scale things on YouTube. These are people who are self-representing. So they are showing exactly who they are, exactly who they want everybody else to see them as, but that's not always going to work because not everybody is going to see them. They're going to see that center level, and that's the only kind of view that they're going to see.
Okay, so as a religious studies major, part of what I look at is the demographics of the different religions in the United States, because America is commonly presented as a Christian nation, and that has a really big impact on how Americans view LGBT individual characters. And I pulled this graphic together from a poll run in July by ABC News. It was self-reporting, so obviously the results are going to be a little bit skewed, but the results found that 83% of Americans self-identify as Christians, and we'll get into the breakdown of which denominations that on the next slide. 13% identified themselves as either atheist, agnostic, or with no religious affiliation, and only 4% were something other than Christian, and that encapsulates people who were Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, etc. And for the Christians, 53% of Americans identified themselves as Protestants. That's United Methodist, Presbyterian, African American Episcopal, Southern Baptist. 22% identified as Catholic, and 8% identified as other denominations, and that includes Orthodox denominations, Mormon, and anything that's not considered Protestant or Catholic. And so obviously, being Christians, they look to the Bible for guidance, and the Bible actually has a lot of verses, supposedly, about LGBT people and homosexuality and specifics. And so I pulled up the 8 most commonly cited verses, and I am going to read just a couple of these. First, have you guys ever heard of any of these when you're, I don't know if you've ever been engaged with a religious person in a conversation about gay people, but have you ever heard any of these come up in those conversations? Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So I'm gonna read you a couple of the shorter ones because these get really long, but the first one that I have is Romans 1, 26 through 28, and it says, "For this reason God gave them up to degrading passions. Their women exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural, and in the same way also the men, giving up natural intercourse with women, were consumed with passion for one another. Men committed shameless acts with men and received in their own persons the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind and to things that should not be done." And that's generally interpreted as they were all having gay sex, and so God was turned away from them and condemned them. Leviticus 18:22 and 20 and 13 are the ones that are most commonly used. These are from the purity laws for the Jewish people set up after the Exodus. And 18:22 says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, it is an abomination." That's self-explanatory. And then 20:13 says, "If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall be put to their death, their blood is upon them," which is also pretty self-explanatory. There's a lot of debate about how these verses are translated and what the words actually mean in the original Greek or in the original Hebrew, but those are the generally accepted translations by the majority of Christians, is that these verses were written to condemn homosexuality. And the last one I wanted to mention, I'm not going to read it all because it's really long, but in Genesis 19, verses 1 through 11, that's the story of the city of Sodom. Has anyone heard that story before in church or just in class or whatever? So it's basically what happens, it's called the depravity of Sodom in the New Revised Standard Version, which is the translation that I used to look these up. It's basically the men of Sodom attempt to rape 2 angels who are staying in this guy's house, and because of this depravity that they commit or try to commit, the city is destroyed. And I think it says a lot that people think that the crime that's attempting to be committed in this passage is rape, or is being gay instead of it being rape, which says a lot, I think, about some other cultural things, but that's what the Bible says. However, in a poll run by Pew Research Center, in 2014, this is the most recent statistic that I could find, 54% of all Christians are accepting of LGBT people, or at least believe that society should be accepting of LGBT people, and it breaks down into 70% of Catholics, which was a number that actually surprised me. 66% of mainline Protestants, which is Methodists, Presbyterians, 62% of Orthodox Christians, 51% of historically Black Protestants, 36% of Mormons, and 16% of Jehovah's Witnesses. The last two numbers didn't really surprise me with how low they are. I think that's the general stereotype, is that Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses aren't very accepting, but the other numbers were actually, honestly, very surprising for me to come across.
Alright, so let's switch gears a bit. So these are just some basic misrepresentations that we see, like basic stereotypes that, yeah, they're introducing gay characters into their TV shows, but they're still stereotyping them. So I'm going to talk about these 4, but I'm only going to show 3. I don't know what's up with that one. So the first is the bear. This is typically geared towards a homosexual man. It's the more, like, you know, burly guy, not your typical looking gay man. It's, you know, the more manly man looking. So these are all short clips, but
So you come here all the time? People like me, or I feel accepted. I'm what they call a bear cub.
Because you look yogi?
I don't know, because I'm burly or something.
Okay, so you can see that, like, you know, he's, you know, they look different. That is from Glee. The bigger guy used to be a football player. He's a big athlete, so they call him more the bear because he's, you know, different looking. The next one is, oh dear.
Right now, I'm gonna help you get a boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
And second of all, when I called you a hag, I was bringing attention to the fact that you are honoring the noble and proud tradition of Adam.
Yeah, and I for one am psyched that my very first hag was someone as kick-ass as Miss Tina Cohen-Che.
Okay, so that was the hag, and this is like typically geared towards a female who has attached herself to a gay man because she's looking for that romantic relationship. She can't find it with a straight man, so she attaches herself to a gay man. The one that we can't watch the clip of, that's the beard. That one you hear kind of more commonly, either for a man or a woman. They are gay, they have a wife or a girlfriend to cover up the fact that they're gay. And the last one, this one is, I think, a bigger deal than the other 3. This is the sorry, I'm gay. So go ahead.
Liberty, wait up. We need to talk. I couldn't agree more. You first. You'll be the only person who knows what I'm about to tell you, and I'd like to keep it that way, okay? So, do you promise you can keep a secret? Okay, I promise. Cross your heart and hope to die, promise? Yeah. What is it? I'm gay.
Okay, so that character, the young male, is not gay, but that female liked him, so he was like, oh man, I don't want her to like me, so I'm going to tell her that I'm gay, which is a bigger deal because coming out to anybody, I can imagine, is, in front of what I've seen, is a really big deal. So when a TV show kind of just throws it in there like it's no big deal, that can be really terribly misrepresented.
Okay, so as an accounting major, I kind of found some statistics of occurrence of LGBTQ characters and how often they're like present on a show, and then it breaks down like that actual characters, how many of them are gay, how many are lesbians, how many are bi females, how many are bi males, how many trans women, how many trans males. So the Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation organization, also known as GLAAD, has been tracking the presence of LGBTQ characters in TV shows for about 20 years, and they found that today you kind of see the highest percentage of these characters on television than ever before, which is good, but the representation of these characters isn't as good as it should be. They're still falling victim to stereotypes and tropes, which is what's keeping the old prejudices alive. And they're often killed off of shows for no reason. For example, the most common ending for a lesbian woman is a violent death. So producers and writers need to be challenging themselves, questioning what message they're sending to the viewers by just killing LGBTQ characters off for really just no reason. So to break it down, on the left, this is the diversity of characters on primetime scripted television 2016-2017. So all this is the straight people, and then this little one is LGBTQ characters. So about 95% is straight, and that was 854 characters. And then the 5% was only 43 characters. So then on the right, they broke down not just this 5%, but they found 28 more characters on non-scripted series because 43 was kind of just a population that was too small for them to break down. They wanted at least 50. So they found 71, and so 12 of the characters were lesbians, 35 were gay, 16 were bisexual females, 5 were bisexual males, and only 3 of them were transgender characters. So that's just this graphic right there. So this shows that even when the LGBTQ characters are used, the representation is uneven. So the cable and streaming is a big difference too. They tried to have it a little more equal over there, even though it's not. So cable is just standard cable, and then the streaming that I'll talk about is stuff like Hulu, Netflix, Amazon. So for the cable representation of the LGBTQ characters, 20% are lesbians, 46% are gay, 25% are bisexual females, 7% were bisexual males, and only 1% were trans females, and only 2% were trans men. So kind of what I took from it is, I guess, I asked a few people, like, when they think of gay, like, what do they think of, like, LGBTQ, what do they think of? And most of them just say, oh, gay and lesbian, and oh, girls who be bisexual. And so people kind of forget about the transgender. The typical gay is just, oh, gay men and gay girls. And so they kind of, you see that as just more common because that's kind of just like the typical stereotype. People aren't thinking of transgender as well. So then the streaming was a little more equal. 43% are lesbians, 23% are gay, 20% are bisexual females, 6% were bisexual males, 11% were trans females, which was a kind of a big jump, 10%. But then there was 0% of them were trans men. So while they're trying to break it up a little more evenly, they're still failing to do it, and then they're leaving out a complete area, the trans men. So these graphs, they showed how, like, even when the characters are apparent, the representation just is still yet to be equal. So I wanted to relate the misrepresentation into real life too. As an accounting major, a business major, as a woman, they always say, like, women are going to have to work harder, especially in accounting. For some reason, people think men are better at math than women when they're not. So employment equality has always been a thing. For girls especially, you've always had to be aware of, like, the glass ceiling, which kind of just says, like, once you get to a certain point in your career, like, you're not going to advance anymore, where a guy who's equally qualified or even sometimes less qualified will continue going. It's easier for them to become a CEO and stuff. And they've put equal pay acts in place, which I still believe are not always in place. But in an article called Pride and Prejudice, Employment Discrimination Against Openly Gay Men in the United States, they found a wage gap between heterosexual and homosexual men. Some tried to argue that it was based off of the productivity, how competent the workers were and how quickly they could work, but the experiment showed otherwise. So 40% of gay applicants were less likely to be offered a job over their equally qualified straight opponents, and if hired, the gay and bisexual men were earning up to 32% less than their equally qualified straight co-workers. And then it also showed that after transitioning, trans women's earnings were dropping. And this was apparent even in government jobs. Government workers were earning up to 29% less than other equally qualified coworkers. And so this ties into income. So the household incomes of same-sex couples were 20% less than the heterosexual couples. You could go to the next one. And then these earnings and it harder to be getting a job is obviously going to link into poverty. So same-sex couples, like I said, they earn less income, so they're more likely to live in poverty than heterosexual couple families. And what I found to be even more upsetting was that African American same-sex couples were even more likely to live in poverty than white same-sex couples. And then these poverty rates spill off into the children. So the poverty rate of children with heterosexual parents was 9%, and children living in poverty with two male parents was 21%, and two female parents was 20%. So these rates are just really saddening, and the studies were found after they controlled variables that could be contributing to the poverty level adjusted. So these really were just all based on sexual orientation.
So I'm a public relation major, and as such, when we're not trying to strategize a campaign, we actually have to implement those campaigns, and a lot of that deals with the news media. We have to talk with newspapers, we have to talk with radio stations, we have to have those good relationships. So I decided to look into that to see how is the news talking about LGBT, their community. So if you can see it, it looks really complicated, but basically this was recently done in 2016 after the election, and it shows the trust level of news sources, and they base it off of whether they were conservative or liberal, and it has mixed or, you know, mostly liberal compared to mostly conservative. So it shows that the top ones are like BBC, NPR, Wall Street Journal, CNN's up there, and Fox News is also up there, and the maroon is basically equal. So it means that both liberals and conservatives have trust in them. And then it goes down and it's unequal when it gets to like Huffington Post. Not really. They kind of trust them, but they kind of don't trust them. And then it goes down to like shows, and those they don't really have any trust at all. And this is focused on mostly just political affiliation. But this influences news outlets. Whether you're liberal or conservative is going to influence what you're watching, and what you're watching is going to influence what you believe. So one of the biggest things that we've seen in the past is the HIV epidemic and homophobia and how it influenced it. So a lot of the LGBT members were hated from a lot of the country because of having HIV. There was a lot of misinformation going out because of news stations. They were saying it was only happening in men, it didn't affect women, and this obviously can be extremely dangerous. Women and men have sex too. They said that it was only sexually transmitted compared to it can go through drug use. So it was a dangerous thing when you are putting out information that isn't correct, and even some of their news station, what they were saying, the Daily Mirror read alert over gay plague. This obviously is incorrect, as we know now, but during that time, this was the information that was going out. This is what your news outlets were saying about HIV. So it happened just, 40 years ago, and that's pretty scary. So then I looked into current day. This isn't super recent, but it has sort of an example of what your news stations can really do and how much it influences what you believe. So Lawrence versus Texas was in June 2003, and it was to decriminalize homosexual sex. So it was criminal to have homosexual sex in Texas during this time. And before the official decision was put out, 60% of those voters supported the decriminalization. They wanted it to be decriminalized. And then after it was passed thankfully, it dropped just 2 months later to 49%. And the study wanted to see, why did that happen? Why was there this drop? If they supported it, they got what they wanted, why would they suddenly not support this cause? And what they found was that after the news stations were discussing the decision, they were also saying what's going to happen next.
And what they said was, is this going to lead to the legalization of same-sex marriage? And this was a while back, so during that time, people were not in support of this. It was not something that people wanted. And talks, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about what we can do as watchers of news, what we can do to better make sure that we're getting news that's important and also truthful, as well as if you go into any of those fields or if you're working with them, how to make sure that you're working with news outlets that are not biased and that they're not telling you one thing that is actually the other.
Okay, so something that you guys might not know about me is that outside of my work in the classroom, I'm actually a gaming journalist. I work for a website called obelisk.com, and I write, news and reviews and reports on different things going on in the gaming industry and within gamer culture. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because it is part of representation. And ever since games have existed, essentially there have always been LGBT characters in video games, but especially since the early 2000s, there have been more and more openly LGBT characters introduced into games, especially AAA titles, which are the big budget, big studio games that you see advertisements for and stuff like that. And the one game that I wanted to talk about, it came out in 2013. It's called The Last of Us. It's third-person action survival horror game. But in their DLC that they released in 2014, it was called Left Behind. It revolves around one of the main characters, Ellie, and in the scene that you guys are about to watch, she kisses her best friend. And there was a really negative reaction to this scene, but before I talk about that, I'm going to have you guys watch it. I'm sorry, this is one of my favorite scenes in the entire game. So, this was a really important scene in the game, and Ellie is the whole point of the game. You spend the entire game protecting her, and a lot of players, when it was revealed, and it was confirmed by her writer in a tweet that Ellie and Riley were both lesbians. A lot of players were really angry about this. You can go ahead. I think you have to click off the video and then... Yeah. Okay. So these are just some of the YouTube comments on this scene. We all know YouTube comments are a bad place, but you can take a second and if you can read those, go ahead and read through them while I talk. But I wrote an article for Obelisk about the way that LGBT characters are received and written in video games, and the big focus of my article was this game, and it was Ellie and Riley's story, because this scene isn't included in the main game. It's locked behind a $14 price tag, and a lot of people didn't purchase it. They don't believe in buying DLC. They don't want to play it, couldn't afford it for whatever reason. And this is the only hint of anything about Ellie's sexuality that you get in the entire game. And there are several other gay characters in the game, but they all die. And later on in this game, the girl that was with Ellie, Riley, dies as well. She gets bitten by a zombie, and it's assumed that she either turns into one or she is killed. And so even when you have this really emotional, sweet scene, all the gay characters are still killed off, and they are still obviously received very negatively by the fans, which is something that I, as someone who works in the gaming community, who writes about games and things like that, I take it as my personal responsibility to try and change the way that fans react to these characters. Okay.
So now, I'm going to talk about theater, because I'm a theater major. Theater has always been a force for social change, and a lot of playwrights have actually used theater to combat or address homophobia in, just our society. And everyone has a stereotype that all men in theater are gay, which I guess I'm part of that stereotype, but, but many people actually argue that Broadway isn't as friendly towards LGBT people as many think. In December of 2013, the lineup of Broadway shows, only 8 of them had featured any character that was any type of sexual minority. That included like Cabaret, Mamma Mia, Chicago, and Book of Mormon. And in a lot of these, and a lot of theater shows in general, the sexuality of these sexual minorities is used as a gag or a way to get a laugh, like Book of Mormon or Avenue Q. You can go on. Just because of the time, we're not going to actually watch these scenes. In the Book of Mormon, they actually sing a song about one of the characters is having gay thoughts, and they're like, well, you can just, the song is called Turn It Off, and you can turn it off like a light switch. They're like, just push all these feelings down. And then in Avenue Q, which was this video, it's one of the roommates telling his other roommate that if you were gay, I'd still like you and I'd still support you, which I'm pretty sure they end up getting together at the end of the show. So it's kind of like they use it as a laugh, but then promote positive imagery, so it just shows that you can have a laugh, but still promote it, positive images. But to talk about shows that are actually like relevant to LGBT and LGBT issues, I'm going to start off with Angels in America. It's a play by Tony Kushner. It actually won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, the Tony Award for Best Play, and the Drama Desk Award for Outstanding Play. It premiered in 1991, and it focuses on a gay couple living in Manhattan. And the play itself is an examination of homosexuality and AIDS. And the play was actually considered very controversial because of its themes of homosexuality, AIDS, and there was some male nudity, and so people were like, no. And in 1996, protests were held outside of the production by the Charlotte Repertory Theater, and this controversy actually led to funding cuts for that theater the next year. And this play is really important because it spoke about the AIDS epidemic when it was really one of those things like you didn't talk about, you didn't like, even like as far after as it was, like, you know, they still just actually like were like, which you can't, it's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but that's actually Andrew Garfield in a production of Angels in America. But you can go ahead and go to the next slide. The next play I want to talk about is Corpus Christi. It's by Terrence McNally. It premiered October 13th, 1998. Terrence McNally is actually a gay man. But when it premiered, it was actually 5 months from when it was supposed to premiere, and they had pushed it back due to threats of violence because of the play. The Corpus Christi Act depicts Jesus and his disciples as gay men living in modern Texas, and it's set like in contemporary time for whenever the play's performed. Like it would be set like in 2017 Texas if it was performed today. It was criticized for having a blasphemous message and containing anti-Catholic themes, and that's why a lot of people reacted negatively. And the last play I want to talk about is the Laramie Project. It was written by Moses Kaufman and other members of the Tectonic Theater production, and it actually focuses on the real-life 1998 murder of Matthew Shepard, where he was brutally beaten by 2 men after they took him out of a bar, and then they left him tangled up in a barbed wire fence to die, which he did pass away. And the play contains hundreds of pieces of interviews, journals, and news reports. The interviews that the cast actually did, but the play itself was meant to draw attention to the lack of hate crime laws that the United States had.
Okay, so we're going to switch it back to television for a moment. So just to kind of, before I get into the bulk of my next thing, the very first, at least we assume, the very first gay character on television or mention of was a character in All in the Family. This was in 1971. We're not going to watch the clip, but it's, they just mention him in this clip when it's just like, oh, this guy is as queer as a $4 bill, and they go back and forth. They use all the language that you're not going to hear even probably outside of the media today. It's very crude, very vulgar, it's rough. So that was kind of where it started, but it's definitely grown from there. So we do see shows like Modern Family. We talked about it a little bit earlier, and from what I thought before, and what I still think, before doing this was that it has a very accurate representation. But I looked into a theory by Audrey Cavalante. It's the anxious displacement theory, and basically what this is that it marks a significant shift in the representation of homosexuality in popular media. So what Cavalante discussed are there are 3 different things that anxious displacement is motivated by within television shows. The first thing is the popular gay rights discourse. So television shows are trying to fit that, especially with the legalization of same-sex marriage a couple of years ago. They're trying to fit that norm a lot more often. So it's more common now that you're going to see a gay couple in a television show like Modern Family than you would, 10 years ago. The next thing is transformational quality of media. So the directors, filmmakers, writers, whatever the case may be, are trying to shift your way of thinking. That isn't exactly the case with all shows or any shows necessarily, but they are implementing these norms, this lifestyle kind of an idea into the shows to get you to see that times are changing, so they're trying to transform it a bit. And the last thing are the producers and showrunners and such. So whoever wrote the show, I don't have his name written down, but he was quoted in E! News saying, "We knew we had to do a gay family because that's something very new and it could add a really nice texture to the group. Originally, Mitch and Cam were not supposed to be in the show. That wasn't an original part of the script, but they thought, hey, to appear more modern, get it, we are going to add a homosexual couple." So while Modern Family might seem as if they represent homosexuality well, and I think they do, especially showing the struggles and what they go through to get where they are 9 seasons later, whatever it is, the show's creators, writers did add the gay couple to seem more relevant, so they can appear that like, oh, look at us, we agree, we're on your side, so watch our show, invest money into our show, that kind of thing. So they are doing it, and I'm sure the right reasons are there, but there are also some underlying reasons. So just kind of on the flip side of that, we're talking about misrepresentation, representation, and even when television shows represent homosexuality well, it's not always taken so well by the viewers. So I don't know if you guys remember Good Luck Charlie. It was on Disney, ran for 4 years, last aired in February of 2014. This is a short clip, so can you click that for me? We'll watch it. This is why it was canceled.
Charlie, honey, you ready for your play date? Yay!
Who's coming over?
Taylor. I invited her parents, too.
So we're all having a play date?
Oh, honey, this one is actually going to be fun. I met the mom, Susan. She's really nice.
Oh, I met her. I thought her name was Cheryl.
No, it's Susan.
Are you sure?
Am I sure that I'm right and you're wrong? Always. Okay, that must be done. Hi! Taylor! Hi, Susan.
Hi. Amy, this is Taylor's other mom, Cheryl.
Oh, hi. This is my husband, Bob.
Hey, nice to meet you. Come on in. Come on in. Taylor has 2 moms.
Nothing gets past you, Bob.
Okay, so... Okay, so in case you're wondering, that's why Good Luck Charlie got canceled. And I'm sure there were other responses, but the organization, group, whatever, 1 Million Moms, took to the internet like they do for most things, and had a response saying that Disney should be promoting entertainment, not pushing the agenda. So Disney responded, like all Disney Channel programming, it was developed to be more relevant for kids with families around the world and to reflect themes of diversity and inclusiveness. So Disney was trying to to appeal to all families, all lifestyles, everything like that, and it was canceled because of negative responses, which brings me to the next thing, which is advertisements. Especially, like I said, with other TV shows, legalization of same-sex marriage, you see more LGBT representation in advertisements. Of course, one of the more popular ones is the Campbell's Soup ad. So again, due to time, no. It's 2 dads. They had this real-life campaign, Campbell's did. Yeah, you're doing great. This real-life campaign, so they were hiring real families to be in their commercials. So this specific family was 2 gay dads with their young son. 1 Million Moms took to the internet yet again and said things, it's up there, Things like featured a married couple. How confusing for this little boy and for all children around viewing this commercial, and Campbell's Soup is glorifying this unnatural marriage. Anytime that something like this happens and 1 Million Moms responds, they talk about boycotting. There wasn't really a big loss to Campbell's Soup after this ad, so I don't think it worked, but they tried. The next thing is this Wells Fargo ad. This was pretty recent as well. It is 2 moms who are attempting to adopt a young deaf girl. It shows the process of them learning how to do sign language, meeting the girl, taking her home. And there was a Christian evangelist whose name is Franklin Graham, and he just was furious. He closed his accounts with Wells Fargo, closed anything that had to do with companies related to Wells Fargo, because he was just up in arms. He said, "Have you ever asked yourself, how can we fight the tide of moral decay that is being crammed down our throats by big businesses, the media, and the gay and lesbian community?" So he had an attempt online to gather this large audience to close your accounts, we need to be against them. And really he just got like over 40,000 shares about like how absurd it was, and like all these comments that were just against him, what are you doing? Things like that. I actually, if you go to the next slide, this is the response to the Campbell's Soup ad that I forgot was here. So what this ad is, it's, sorry, it says, "I'm so sick of the homosexual agenda, you sell soup, not butt sex. Please take your ad down or you will not have a company anymore." So there was this fake account that looks like it's from Campbell's, it's Campbell's for Help, that just slammed her. And she goes back and forth. She's got this aggressive style, so there are 5 different communication styles: passive aggressive, assertive, and then there's the aggressive style, and of course some other ones. And that's basically the "I'm right, you're wrong, I'm not letting you win, this is mine." And she just kept going. This actually goes longer. She just has this style that she's not going to let up. She's right, and everybody else, you know, you're wrong. So she doesn't eat Campbell's Soup anymore, but it's alright.
Okay, so we sort of want to end with, this is a lot of misrepresentation. There were some good things, but a lot of it was pretty negative. And recently, this is super recent, you might have already seen it, it's called In a Heartbeat. And it's a really short film, and it won a lot of awards. It raised more money than it was expected to, so it got a really good response, which is kind of showing that although there is a lot of misrepresentation, still to this day we see it, there is hope. There's, this came out and it's kind of cute. So it's the kids react to it, so we're just going to watch part of it. It ends with them sort of talking about it. The kids get to talk about it, but basically most of the kids have a pretty good reaction to it, and it just sort of shows that, we're accepting of it, but also this next generation is getting exposed to it and is also accepting of it as well. So just sort of to end on a little happier note.
Is that boy in love with the other one? I think the heart loves it. This is In a Heartbeat.
Oh, I saw this. Okay.
In a Heartbeat. Oh my god, this might make me cry.
So that was just like to kind of show that it is getting better, and we're all going to go through quickly what we would do to sort of our action plan. So I'm public relations, so we all decided that we would each do infographics. Since we're all pretty sort of different majors, it's going to vary. But for mine, I would talk about news, obviously. I would focus on how to get good news, how to get news that's not going to be biased one way or another, and if you are watching news that is, how to go in with an open mind. And these would be put up all over campus, not just in the public relations department, but in KIC and all those other places.
For mine at least, it would be difficult to do at Mountain Union, but I feel like to encourage diversity and positive representation, finding programs for playwrights and screenwriting, and giving them information on how to portray these sexual minorities positively would go a long way, because teaching it to actors, it's like they're not the ones that make the plays, they're acting where they can.
So the thing about our topic is that it's not on campus. We do have the Dynamo, we do have the radio station, but we're not Hollywood, we're not in the media. However, some of us I know want to work in the media. Eventually I'd like to work for a social media department of a nonprofit, which is a bit different because it's not big media, but it is media, and I think that there's a way that we can talk about how to portray LGBT community, not even just in the big media, but on social media, and I think you can start now with our campus, with our campus social media, with the Dynamo, with the radio station, when we graduate, what we do after here. Obviously, Jess and I are in the same department, so we similar infographic kind of things, but I just think that even outside of television shows and movies, there are other forms of media, like the news, like video games, that also need to be represented, and that is something from a communication standpoint that would be really important, considering all of media is communication.
With accounting, like I said, professors will talk to us a lot about mostly historically like wage gaps between men and women, so kind of just to urge professors to also touch on the wage gaps between sexual orientations. I'm the VP in accounting club, so we have accountants and business owners come in to talk to the club members, and we try to always make sure to have equal, like, men come in and women, so it's just equal representation for men and women. But kind of now after doing all this, I'm gonna just talk to the president and talk about how we need to also try to find people who are successful in the business world, and they could come in and talk about their struggles as a member of the LGBTQ community and how they got to where they are, as well as just inviting people who aren't just accounting majors to come in and listen to those people talk, because even if it's an accountant talking, I think anyone in the LGBTQ community is gonna face the same issues when they're trying to enter the workforce.
Okay, and I guess for me in the religious studies department, you can't really infographic somebody into changing their religious beliefs, but I feel like I could work with Dr. Haddix and work with Kyle, whose last name I can't remember.
Woodrow.
Reverend Woodrow.
Yes.